to talk about the epistle of Polycarp to the Philippians. It's a first century early Christian writing. There's many good ones, and this is one of the very good ones. So he was a bishop of Smyrna in the first century. This is the same Smyrna that you read in the book of Revelations, from where Christ says, "I know your works, tribulation and poverty, but you are rich." So that's the same church. And he actually, I've just checked, he actually was martyred around 150 to 160, somewhere there, AD. So no doubt this is the same person that Christ is talking to directly in the book of Revelations as head of that church at the time. And he's written a nice little epistle, short one, to the Philippians, just to cover various topics. The lovely thing about reading the early Christian writings, more than most things, is you see a common shared love between any and all throughout all Christianity throughout the world, whether they're Greeks, Jews become Christians, or other Gentiles of various nations. They're all like, you get this strong sense it's all one unity. There's no this segregation type of mentality at all. Anyway, so it was more simple, more pure faith in the early Christian days, just more just covering the basics all the time. So Bishop of Smyrna is in modern day Turkey, and basically this was pretty much the area that St. John the Apostle, St. John the Beloved, that was his main focus of ministry as well, actually. And so all the churches around there that you read in the book of Revelations, they're in fairly close proximity to each other in Revelations. But anyway, so he's Polycarp, Bishop of Smyrna, writing to the Philippians. He covers a lot of things in a short little letter, actually. It's very nice. It's only like, 12 or 13 chapters. Just a quick overview to start with. He firstly starts with praising the Philippians for their good character and Christianity and so forth. It's always nice, I guess, to start with a positive. And then he exhorts them, encourages them in their virtues of spiritual walk in the Lord. And then in chapter 3, he talks about his personal unworthiness in his own opinion. It continues in more exhortations, chapter 4. Chapter 5, he talks about serve to the servants, deacons, youths, and virgins, and other people like that. That's probably spot on to what would be most beneficial, I suppose. I'll cover that in a little bit. Chapter 6 is talking about some of the priests, some encouragement and other things. 7 is about avoiding heresies, and then also about fasting and prayer. Chapter 8 is just more encouragement, perseverance, talk about perseverance and patience, as well as chapter 9. And chapter 10 is about continuing virtues, practicing virtues, and then other bits and pieces after that. So it's a really nice short letter, straight to the point. It's no long-winded, complex language. It's just simple love and sharing of the gospel truths to other Christian brothers and sisters, basically. So now Philippi is about 700 kilometers west of Smyrna in Greece, in case you didn't know. That's the same place that St. Paul wrote his epistle to the Philippians as well. So they had a nice, the Christians got around in that time. Might have taken a bit of a while to get the letters around, but they did get around. So it was good. And so he covers a lot of things, actually. I suppose I'll just cover the servants thing first, because that's probably perfectly suited to this meeting. I'll just read out parts of it. He says, in like manner, should the deacons be blameless? Deacons, we can just change it for servants. It's a type of servant. Before the face of his righteousness, as being servants of God and Christ and not of men. He says they should not be slanderers, double-tongued, or lovers of money, but temperate in all things, compassionate, industrious, walking according to the truth of the Lord, who was the servant of all. Yeah, so it is actually, you guys are lucky if you become servants and like more active in serving the church, because it is a blessing. Actually, it's a type of honor that we give service to God, because God, you'll find you'll get more reward back than what you put in actually. So it's a type of honor that God makes sure you won't go empty-handed. Um, yeah, so he talks about, yes, a lot of things. It's basically, he covers all the basics, all the bases. He wants you can reading his whole epistle, I get the impression he just wants to cover all the basics and have his followers get a good all-rounded cover of the basic gospel, how to continue living, continue in patience, grow in love and virtues and spirituality. And if anyone is in his mind, lucky enough to be persecuted for Christ, it's a reward in heaven waiting for him, basically. Um, he finishes off with a nice summary, talking about with all meekness, gentleness, patience, long suffering, forbearance, and purity. So yeah, he's covering a lot of things here. So we find he's got this humble dedication and love to God and the gospel. Which is just reigns supreme in his everything he does and thinks about. He says, living with purity of heart, mind, and body. So yeah, so all our mind, our thoughts, our bodies, everything, all in one service to God is he's covered everything. In case you didn't know, Polycarp would later be martyred in one of the most fantastic ways I've ever read. There's obviously many great saints throughout the last 2,000 years, but he would be one of them because he had quite a distinguished martyrdom in public exhibition around 150, 160 AD. You can read about that later, but just for this topic, we'll just stick to this one, to this epistle. Yeah, he says a lot of really good things, actually. He mentions things like pray continually for all, despising no one, keep away from false speaking, gossip, talking badly of others, talking about submissive and humility. He says, be of you subject one to another. Not to judge other people as well, which is just what we read in the gospel, the same thing. So you'll find a lot of things that it's just an extension of the gospel, just said in a different way very often. And other times he just says the same thing that St. Paul says in a different way as well.
Sorry, Rob. Just one point. Polycarp, in his letter, he actually mentions St. Paul, and he mentions that he's not worthy because he was invited by the Philippians to write this letter, and he was saying how I am not worthy to be compared to St. Paul. And just on the point of judging people, he said, when you see somebody committing a sin, don't ever judge them because you could be the one committing that sin. And I really I was moved when I read some of his writings when he actually put himself so far down that if you didn't know that it was Saint Polycarp who's speaking, you'd think that this was a tax collector. It's what I mean. That's how he saw himself. He saw himself as a genuine sinner, and this points out something that's really important, and that I heard a sermon by a bishop just a few days ago, who said a lot of the times, a lot of the people in the church, they say, oh, thank God, and God, gave me the grace to do this. But deep down, they're not actually humble. Deep down, they're actually saying, God used me, not you. You know what I mean? So I think it's so important to be blatantly honest with ourselves to the point of saying, it's not me, it's God, and I am a sinner. That requires a lot of courage. And that's the kind of spirit that we get from Saint Polycarp. how honest he was, and when he said I'm a sinner, he genuinely meant it. Like he, not to the point of losing hope, but to the point of being humble.
Mm.
Sorry, Rob.
That's a good point, Joe. Very good point. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you said, a dedication to absolute sincerity in every single way. It seems to be his main basis of everything good that came to him. That's where everything starts, isn't it? Our very heart's intention. That's where all goodness can come from. Blessing of God. God sees our heart and rewards us accordingly. Yeah, and then from that, then we can add lots of things. Over time we can stop sinning if we have any bad habits, and then we can, over more time, maybe God willing, we can get some virtues. That's the hope. And even higher things than that, if God willing, God wills it. But yeah, yeah, it's right, Joe. Yeah, it's without that deep honest sincerity, it's like a basis to serve as God. That's right. Yeah.
Can I just mention something else that Polycarp mentioned in his letter? There was a man, I can't remember his name. It's in the letter, who went with the crowd who were being offered to martyrdom, but this man actually became scared and decided to deny Jesus and save his life.
Yeah.
And Polycarp's point about that was, don't be hasty to not just criticize, but don't be hasty to put yourself in these situations. Martyrs are actually called to martyrdom.
Exactly.
Not everyone is called to martyrdom. So sometimes sometimes we actually apply that in our life, but on a lesser scale. So sometimes what we do is we say, I'm going to fast, all day, like Saint Anthony the Great. I'm not Saint Anthony the Great. I haven't been given that ability and grace to do that. And so what ends up happening, I tend to overload myself, and that would be also a cause for me to lose hope or to not fast at all after that. So in our spiritual life, we have to be wise. That means we don't overload ourselves with things that we're not capable of doing, but at the same time, we don't sort of go and become very lazy and not do anything. So it's a balance. So it's wisdom. And Saint Polycarp was really sort of pointing to that, is that, we have to be wise in our approach to our spiritual life and our walk with God as well. So
you're right, Joe. We have to know our limitations. There's a consequence of what we do, then there's God's blessing in our life to sometimes overcome, or not necessarily overcome, to modify or help us in our own situation. So God will look after us, but he doesn't always take away necessarily the problems that come upon us for whatever reason. He'll support us in those problems instead, actually, typically. Sometimes he gives a cure, sure, sometimes. It's interesting, Joe, you said that. I was only meditating on that exact thing this morning. That's 100% right. So in other words, limitations. You should push yourself in your spiritual life. That's absolutely true, but don't abuse yourself. Don't go too far beyond your means at that time. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint in Christianity. Slowly but surely is the best way to go.